Call to order for the Budget Committee meeting, September 21st, 2023. Got someone coming in. There's Tom. Perfect attendance. Everything's on the table over here, Tom.
I just need a piece of scrap paper.
Just letting you know, Tom, when you're late, you're supposed to bring donuts.
Not late.
That's the rules we have at work.
Yeah, it's still early, look. Isn't that the official clock?
Clock's wrong.
7:01.
1,000 cartons.
Take your name. How are we gonna know who you are?
Again.
Good for being late.
All right, perfect attendance. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. I know we changed the meeting, so thanks for rearranging your schedules and coming to vote. We'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thanks to Alana. Alana's did the minutes from last week. She said it's sometimes hard to hear us, and she didn't know who was who around the table. So we'll just start by going around. You could introduce yourself, and then just try and speak maybe a little slower, more clearly into the microphones for our secretary. So we'll start with you, Sandra.
Sandra Jones.
Robert Kelly.
Charlotte Fife.
John Decker.
Michael Kelly, chair.
Owen Friend Gray, Vice Chair.
Brent Tweed.
Thomas Butkevich.
Jeffrey Morrison.
Matt Sherland.
Megan Sabasco.
Thank you. Next order of business is approval of the minutes from our meeting on September 7th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented with the modification on line 37 to change from Jeffrey Morrison to Bob Kelly. And,
Oh, all right, okay, sorry.
We have one more.
and on line 41 from Mr. Butkevich to Bob Kelly, or Robert Kelly.
I'll second.
Good, question, line 24, 25, just says the town needs to put it to warrant for the voters. And then the next sentence kind of clarifies it, it says if the warrant does or doesn't pass. But still, sort of, that line sort of implies that it has to be put to a warrant article, which I think from Megan's answer last meeting is it's optional whether it actually goes to a warrant article, not mandatory to receive the fundings. I don't know if that can be reworded.
That's part of the previous sentence, right? For the school board to receive the additional funding over and what they receive, the town needs to put it into a warrant.
Yeah, which Megan answered that that's not the case. It doesn't have to be, to receive the funds, we don't need to put it to warrant article. To
Or
appropriate it,
receive
we
If
do.
they don't do the warrant, then it gets put just to the
the general
town general fund. For the school board to receive it, it has to be on a
Right,
warrant
what
article.
you're saying is correct, that's not what that sentence says. It says, there was discussion amongst the board that in order to receive the additional funding over and above what they normally receive, the town needs to put it to warrant for the voters. Sort of, that sentence in and of itself is implying that you have to put it to warrant for it to receive it. That's the
Because
way I
the
read
addition
that.
would be, there was a discussion that in order for the school board to
yeah, school,
receive
yeah.
the additional
In order for the
funding.
school board to appropriate that money.
In order to appropriate
The
the
money,
funds,
the
so
town's gonna receive the money unless the school decides to try to appropriate it.
we could strike receive and say appropriate, because that would then, I would believe, change the, in order to appropriate the additional funding. Because it's, then that would cancel out the receive, does that seem?
Should we add school board to, should
I mean,
add
it's-
school before
This-
board on line 23?
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
I
That it was a
believe the
school.
initial board in that sentence is this board, and then
Right.
there's
I mean,
an
it's-
additional. So there was
Okay.
discussion amongst this board that in order for the school board to receive additional funding, the town would need to appropriate it into a warrant article or something along that
Yeah.
line would.
It's a lot
I
of
think,
days.
clear.
Well, no, I think that's saying the opposite. but we don't need a warrant, we need a warrant article to appropriate it, not to receive it. I guess that's the point that I'm making.
Yeah, the town doesn't need to do anything.
So if we
Right.
add for the school
So
board
just
before
change
to,
receive to appropriate
receive to appropriate?
And add
on
the
line
school.
23.
But then over and above what they normally receive.
Where do you need
Um,
the school?
You probably would need to strike over and above what they normally receive, because then that doesn't really go if we change receive to appropriate.
You wanted to,
Over and above is what they normally appropriate, I guess, too, if both receive were changed to appropriate.
I mean, we don't
Well, but.
We don't really.
Let me
And-
try this and then we'll go farther. This is what I have so far. So we're starting on line 23. There was discussion amongst the board, that's us, that in order for the school board to appropriate the additional funding over and above what they normally appropriate, the town needs to put it to warrant for the voters.
the school board is, I mean,
Yeah, I wouldn't put normally appropriate because that varies every
Right.
year. There's no normal appropriation.
Okay.
So do you say just strike that whole sentence then? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I
Or
think-
not the whole
No,
sentence, I mean that
no,
whole,
just
What if we, over and above what
Maybe-
they normally
maybe
appropriate?
strike
Over
that
and
one.
above what?
Was
over and above
appropriated.
the
What
20
was?
20
Just that.
What
little
was,
section.
was is a better word.
Or what was appropriated, maybe? Sure.
What was?
Yeah, it's the simplest word.
Over and above what
was
was.
appropriated.
11 wordsmiths.
Probably change the board to budget committee,
Okay,
just to
just for clarity.
make that clearer.
Clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'll give it one more shot. We can do as many shots as we need. So this is what I have now for clarity. Starting on line 23, there was discussion amongst the budget committee that in order for the school board to appropriate the additional funding over and above what was already appropriated, the town needs to put it to warrant for the voters.
That's clear. I would understand that if I didn't know, if I hadn't been to the meeting, I'd know what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we have the,
so I will,
do you need-
oh, sorry, are there other items for discussion? I was gonna modify my motion. So I will modify my motion to include, starting on line 23, there was discussion amongst the budget committee that in order for the school board to appropriate the additional funding over and above what was already appropriated, the town needs to put it to a warrant article for the voters, in addition to the previous corrections to line 37 and 41 noted.
I'll second that.
good. Second by Jeff Morrison. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. All right.
okay.
You good, Megan?
Yes, I am,
All right, so take your
um,
time, get settled, and then if you could, I think Jeff was the only one that made your meeting last night, so if you could kind of fill us in and.
Tom
Tom was
was
Oh,
there
Tom
as
was there
well.
too? Okay, great.
So,
Charlotte also
Charlotte.
attended.
yep, was able to, yes, a little bit later after we discuss it, so.
For the rest of
um,
us then.
We have a couple of things, I know some members, I'm not sure who, there was a request for some additional, look at some of our budget numbers. This is one of them, which to us was yellow, so apparently they scanned it, so now it's gray. This is the end of fiscal year '23, that is ended but not audited. So these are the most up-to-date we have ending June 30th.
Okay.
2023. And then the white pack is this year's expenditures to date. I was told that these are fairly loose numbers because our BA started on Monday. So some of these are, we're trying to get up to date on some of these. They're really working on ending last year's so they can do all the reporting. So these numbers are much closer to what they should be. We just saw them last night and I asked for the soft copies, got them midday, so
Yeah.
sent them from my phone, so hoped that they looked correct because I couldn't really read them from my
You can
phone.
print out.
We did not see expenditures last night, so this is the first I've seen of expenditures. That's the, revenues.
Revenue?
We did not see revenues, so we didn't have any discussion on this as a board, but we figured we'd share it because when we look at last year's unassigned fund balance, we have to look at what's in the expenditures, but also if there were revenues to offset if there was any additional fund balance, so that's how that comes. And then this this paper right here, which is an email format, and again, sorry, I had to cut and paste on my phone today
That works.
at work. This is what the language of the warrant will read.
Okay.
This is what the school board approved last night to put to, warrant. I don't know if you need me to read it aloud. I can, if someone
Might
wants to
help for,
read it,
yeah,
sure.
for the
So,
for the people at home.
yes. So it reads, Article 1, shall the school district raise and appropriate an additional sum of $186,310 to be added to the 23-24 operating budget adopted by the district in March 2023 for the purpose of building maintenance, technology for cybersecurity measures and equipment, and curriculum materials. Said funds to come from the increased education funding, in parentheses, adequacy aid, to be received from the state of New Hampshire for fiscal year 23-24, and not from general taxation. So the school board did vote and approve that 5-0 last night. The hope is that this committee could vote on this tonight. We are planning to post this because this special meeting to vote on this will be October 4th. So this needs to be posted by next Wednesday. That's why we couldn't meet Thursday. So that is our hope. But that is the board's decision if they feel like they have enough information and they can vote on it. So I know we spoke a bit last meeting, but just for some updates, the board plans to present at the public meeting the areas specifically in the budget lines. So we, in the article, designated generally the areas that we're looking to add this additional funds. But at the meeting, we'll have a copy of the budget which shows the lines and the additions to each of those lines.
Kind of like the breakdown from that
Right.
186 number.
186, so that we had determined, and I can pull up my notes for that, I believe I shared last meeting, what we had looked at for the different dollar amounts. So if you'd like, we found out last night, again, when we first saw, that our fund balance from the end, if you go to the back page of our expenditures, is $12,677 is where we ended our year with 6,000 still in possible encumbrances that to be cleared. And that is the tightest we have ever seen. So that's why we had said, you know, obviously we're hoping that there is some revenues to offset because we also purchased a boiler that was installed this summer. And there is a hope that it can be paid, a portion of it out of our ESSER funds. But if that is not approved, that full cost of $268,000 will be pushed into this budget. Our thought was that some could come out of the end of last year's budget. The school board has approved $100,000 to come out of fund balance. But with this balance, none of our warrants are funded, and so all the capital reserve warrants, just from this dollar amount, would certainly not be funded. When we look at the revenues, hopefully, you know, that piece, that there is some additional funds from that to fund our capital reserve accounts. I know there had been discussion previously that in the past, the school board has returned funds to the general fund at the end of the year, and the sense would be why we're going to add money to the budget if we're just going to return it at the end of the year. And when we saw these numbers, this really solidified to us that last year's budget was very, very tight.
Very tight, right.
And so we've already, in some lines this year, have exceeded what was budgeted. So that's why the school board felt that it would be the most beneficial to accept these funds and put them in those areas of the operating budget. And then, you know, obviously the year would play out, and then if there were funds at the end of the year, it would be the same. So that's that. So does anyone have any questions specifically? I got
a question on this one here. What was redacted out of here?
Oh, so it's not, I just asked them to, I thought they could just print a new report, but they did not. These are grant funds, so our grant funds in the, I think you're probably used to another one that just had our funds. The way they've been running the reports now, all our grants run through the same software, but the grants are not from our raised and appropriated funds, so they track a little different. So everything that is purchased in and out of grant funds, it goes through our software system, but doesn't come from raised and appropriated funds. Does that make sense? So the grant funds are kind of like an in and out. So if we're given $50,000 or, you know, for a grant, it's paid in and out from there. So that's why it just makes it messy, because grant funds are not on a budget year. We get funds and they cross budget years. And so those numbers make it makes it look unclear of what was actually in this year's budget, because they don't follow the same budget cycles. They give you 2 or 3 years to use funds from a grant. So because of that, I just asked them to, again, provide a report that was only Fund 1, which is general fund from taxation. So it's nothing, nothing fishy. I just had thought they would print me a new
So
one,
this
and
is
they
like
did
the
not.
balances of all these grant funds?
No, it's literally the line items of grant spending. So we had a whole rest of a packet of more, we had another 12 pages on the back of this that was all the grant funds. So I had asked for a report of just the general fund, which is Fund 1, which is what comes from taxation.
How much unspent grant money is there?
Oh, I would not know that. The grant funds, again, are kind of on a rotating cycle, so we now see them in these reports more often, but I'm not sure that there's like a set dollar amount. There's quite a few. There's Title I, Title II, you know, there's the ESSER funds, all of those, and again, they cross years, so it's really hard to, and then they write to a grant, request the funds, and then sometimes that doesn't happen, or if it pays for a thing and it's cheaper, then there's $5 left in it, you know, they're kind of, so they really work hard to utilize those funds, because they are for certain purposes, each of the different grant funds. But some of that is beyond my knowledge of how much, because they are not, like our budget is a year and it stops, and then we use those funds, and the grants are kind of all over the place. I hope that answers your question.
So we saw from this first report then, so that's the budget from
So this is what's left in the
2022,
budget.
2023
$12,000.
is $12,000. And then this other page, the more white looking page, that's this year's,
This year's.
year to date.
And so there are some things you can see, so, a couple of things that have gone through here are textbooks. So, we made a purchase of textbooks. I think I shared this last meeting. We were given $1 amount and had.
Sorry,
when
Megan,
we-
what line are you on?
Sorry, it's on the second page. It's
The one at 3,000%?
yeah, 3,000%. So, 1,156.41.01, and that is just a portion of the textbooks. The textbooks, for those who were in the budget committee last year, we had put, I believe, between the two lines, the line below it, we put $6,000, 5,000 in one, 1,000 in another, and then had intended to use our textbook capital reserve fund. The cost of the textbooks was $25,000 over the $40,000 that was taken from capital reserve. So they cost significantly more than we'd had in the budget line for them, because they are curriculum supplies. They were a purchase that was needed, so we still made that purchase, but that was the reason why we had determined that some of the funds would go into this line to help support that line. So that tracks through there.
Sorry about the textbooks, the increased cost of the textbooks, is that because you guys were able to find textbooks and instructional materials that didn't have expiration dates?
So the textbooks that we use, it's a combination curriculum, so they come with a license to use them for so many years. So there's an online version and a consumables version. And so you purchase them in a so many year cycle.
How many years do they generally go?
So you can purchase them for various amounts of years. If you purchase them for a longer amount, they're typically cheaper than just like any sort of kind of subscription. So, I may have that, I'd have to look into, if we were given those different amounts. But they're also loosely based on the per pupil use. Sometimes, so when they were originally quoted, it was a much lower number. Then when they went to be purchased, it was higher.
Does anyone still sell textbooks and instructional materials that don't expire? Surely there must be some open source materials available or textbooks that don't expire, because it seems like this is a big expense that comes up every few years, and it's now been, they've created a business model where your textbooks are expiring faster than a textbook would normally wear out or go out of date. And it sounds like a big scam.
We discussed that last night, that we would really appreciate a schedule of these purchases, how we're doing them, because I'm not sure that our textbook capital reserve fund was funded with the knowledge of how much these were going up and how much we were gonna have to spend on that. But it is true, no one's dropping a box of textbooks that you could continue to use longer if you didn't have the funds that year.
Have you guys looked for non-expiring textbooks?
Sorry,
Sure,
so
I feel like
I'm gonna
someone
jump in, because it's maybe farther on when we look at the school budgets,
Yeah,
this might be
I
more
agree. I'm just
appropriate.
wondering.
Let's stick to the warrant article and discussion on that.
Thank you. And so then, you can look through some of the things that, have purchased the boiler. We've only made the first payment on, and that right now is sitting in an ESSER grant fund. The second portion of that, which will be $30,000, has not been paid yet because the project isn't completed. So, but that will be hitting one of our building maintenance lines. If you'd like to look at what the building maintenance lines looked like in the past, it was a lot of money was spent this year because of the failing systems in the building. So we know that line will have an expense regardless of the other half of it being paid out of ESSER if that happens. So that line will overexpend. And then the other area which has not hit, but is the technology, cybersecurity. So we had a cybersecurity audit, and we are in the process of going through increasing some of our cybersecurity within the building. So we know that there will be a costs associated with going through that process.
You had mentioned that last night at the meeting. It wasn't clear to me. Was there a cybersecurity incident?
So we had, there was something brought to our attention, and we had felt that we needed to have a more complete audit to make sure that there was not any large system failures going on. But when they do that audit, there are certain things that need to be maybe raised for our security measures. So again, some of this is our technology director is a little above my head with all the cybersecurity, but given the report, it was mentioned in our meeting last night, we do have a report. Some of that is obviously non-public information because it is about our security.
Right.
And so there will be a report we're hoping to have that can be released with, some basic information, but the report we have received is not for public consumption at this time. So, but that is our plan to ensure that student data and information and everything is secure in the building. So that is why we're going to be taking some steps forward. And so we know that is not something we had anticipated in this budget, and so we know that would be an area that would need some additional funds.
I think one of the other things we had talked about last week for expenses was the freezer that failed and all the food in it. Was there a significant cost with that? The repair on that and the food replacement and stuff? Is that something that this might go towards as well, or is that not significant enough?
So that was not boiler cost significant. There was a cost associated with it. I think right now it's obviously will be into a building maintenance line, which we do have some funds in there.
which this is basically going towards anyway, one way or the
I
other.
believe there's an insurance claim on that as well.
And that,
Oh,
I
It's
think.
tied to the roof, so, that's okay, yeah, I'll take it.
No.
But, they had a refrigeration pipe that came up out of the freezer,
Yeah,
ran across the roof deck and was hit.
oh, okay. Okay.
So,
That might
that's-
not hit, that might not
I
hit
was
the
wondering
roof.
if there was insurance, but that makes sense if it was tied to, because a lot of times it's not enough.
it was tied to the
Have a
roofing
claim,
project,
so.
from what I'm told.
Yeah, that's right,
All
that's
right,
our
that-
belief.
That's helpful.
Yeah, that's actually
So-
right. Insurance will pay for it,
Right.
not these lines.
Right, because
Right.
we believe it happened during the roof installation with some,
Yep.
Gotcha, thank you.
Going back to the cybersecurity thing, the consultants that you guys got to do the cybersecurity audit, are they the same vendors that are performing whatever work? to
we don't have
take it?
we don't have any work yet, we have not determined any work, we're still, to be honest, they gave us this giant report and we needed a little more support reading that report because there was a lot of information in there. We're in the process now, the board has not determined steps forward, but we do know that some things were flagged, so that we need to work on some things within our cybersecurity.
Do you have a estimate or dollar amount? You talked about the maintenance and the boiler. Do you have an estimate or dollar amount for how much over we are on that for spending for the year?
For this fiscal year, so.
Well, yeah, for the one that, yeah,
For this,
for
so
23,
I don't
24.
believe that anything has actually been put to that line yet this year. Again, because the boiler, we did make an initial payment of $139,000.
What line are you on?
So I believe that it's not in this budget.
Okay.
I'm just gonna verify, but I think discussing last night that it is not in this budget. Sorry. Because we have not made the second and final payment on the boiler. So additional, we did approve, the glycol to be flushed and cleared last night, at a cost of $7,000. The glycol that, was in the system when they went to change the boiler was bad. It was brown and had debris, and the company installing our boiler said that the warranty on the boiler would possibly be voided if we put this machine and set it up with the glycol that's in, because the pH is at 7.2 and it's supposed to be between 8.5 and 9.5 or something along those lines, and that we just spent all this money on a new boiler to put it in. So we did approve last night $7,000 for glycol, which we did not also have knowledge of when we built this budget.
I'm just curious, what caused that? Is it the pipes though, instead of the boiler? We have glycol, we spray on planes, and we do acidity tests, you know what I mean, on the hydraulic fluids and stuff, send them out.
It's the water that's feeding the system. It's a closed loop system, but it's
Yeah.
fed by domestic water.
True, yeah, it's
And
always gonna be
and
fed.
the water is a little bit acidic that feeds the boiler.
Right, so, I mean, they have things like my neighbors, you know, he'll have hard water. A couple houses up, he'll have acidic water, so it depends on where your well's tapping at.
Yep.
You know, so they do have, you know, filters and stuff to solve that problem, so you're not, you know, paying it. So I was just wondering if there's a filter or something, think about, so it doesn't happen again, because it's gonna happen, keep happening again if you don't solve the problem.
We just, yeah, last night this was discussed because we all learned about glycol when they brought it up months ago. when
Usually
we had-
glycol doesn't go bad.
We had
you know
a
what I mean?
leak and
It's
they
there for
said it
years
should
and
last
years.
10 years and it was not in a good state. So, the thought that what they shared with us last night is this new boiler has a system that actually will not be feeding water. If the levels go low, it'll actually be feeding a glycol mix. So the pressures, because if the pressures go down, it was adding more water, which then affects the pH. And so this new system has a tank, then if it senses it goes low, it feeds more from what's already in the tank.
Right,
So
because it dilutes
keeps
the
it
purpose of the
closed.
glycol, it's not for freezing. So if you
So
just keep adding water to it,
this-
you
It'll
dilute
be
it.
tied into a shot feeder.
The $7,000 also is like a 3 to 4 week flush with a cleaning agent to clean the pipes. Because our belief is that when they put the glycol in, we had a change in glycol and a few months ago, and it's already bad. So the feeling is that it wasn't fully cleaned in the pipes, and so if you put some new, but there's still some
sure
bad
they-
It
glycol
is,
in
but
there.
the problem still is the water. You know what I mean? So you still have to address the water problem, because it will add water throughout the years. It's just not gonna, I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
It keeps adding glycol, but it's bad to put 100% glycol if
Right.
that's the.
And that's not, there's
you know what I mean?
there's a ratio, and I don't know that, but I do know that they suggested also that we're, to be yearly tested and treated, so that we're monitoring the glycol yearly. That was not and then treated, so it stays at the pH it's supposed to be.
Who changed the glycol last?
Who did the service that we, Palmer and Sicard?
Yeah, you sure they changed it?
So we are,
Well, you can only go by what they tell you, you know
right,
what I mean?
so,
If it went bad, that,
I know I did not change it. And
Right.
looking at the pictures we saw of what the glycol looked like last night, it was not in a good state. So
Yeah,
we
it's-
felt that was, so the school board did approve that last night. Our hope is that that can all be done, the flush can happen, and our boiler can be hooked up and working when it starts to get cold in a month. So, but all of these things were really, the glycol happened first and the leaks, and then the boiler. They told us last night that maybe the poor glycol could have started causing some of the leaks and other problems in the building, because it's acidic, so it can.
Right.
So all of these things that happened in the spring were significantly unexpected, and so again, that's why last year's budget was very, very close, and that does not. The new boiler is not in this budget at all in last year's. So right now, again, we've purchased this boiler. It's not fully paid for, but it's $268,000 was what the cost of the boiler was.
So-
So that would be the hope. Our intention was 100,000 from unassigned fund balance from last year, because we were told a different amount when we made that decision, and some out of our ESSER funds. And so ESSER funds, you have to write to and get it approved, and so that is an unknown at this point.
Does the new boiler have extra capacity for the planned, not addition, but modular type expansion plans that you guys have?
So, typically, all the things that we've looked at for additional have their own heating units. It would not be hooked to the building. Everything that we've looked at for past buildings have not actually looked at connecting to the building, because that changes some of the fire code's requirements. So all the things
believe
we've
everything's
always
gonna be
historically
separate,
looked at
standalone.
have been
Standalone,
separate.
like
So,
mini splits,
yeah,
instead
so
of adding
they,
a zone.
it effectively, cost effectively, it doesn't make sense to add it to the system. So, that is not, but it is a significantly more efficient boiler. It's, you know.
So I have a
The
question.
boiler was the original to the building, so.
You mentioned the boiler was 268,000, but it was a planned maintenance item, is that correct? It wasn't something that, it was not, so it was unplanned maintenance, the boiler? Okay.
We know the boilers don't last forever, so.
Well, they had to cancel school how many days last year? Because the boiler just kept failing and they couldn't keep the building warm enough.
We had glycol leaking from the ceiling. So there was quite a few problems last year we had been told our systems were working. We rely on our maintenance, people to give us those updates. We did not know that all these issues, and we also had some, propane pressure issues. So there were just a lot of things that happened last spring. So,
I believe that boiler was original to the building, wasn't it? 95.
yeah.
It's gonna
Added
gonna
space.
crap out at some point.
Did pretty good, 28 years isn't bad for a boiler.
Did the school consider, alternative non-fossil fuel things such as like heat pumps?
Nothing like that was brought to us at all.
That would work to be a solar,
I
right?
don't know if that.
Well, no, I mean, if they're planning to get solar panels at some point, they'll be
Yeah,
generating their own
true.
power, and you can
Oh,
run
no,
these heat
absolutely.
pumps, yeah.
The
I
only
mean,
thing
it may
of
be
that
that the
size
school,
would possibly be geothermal, but I don't know
Right,
if massive
geothermal would make
heat
more sense.
pumps.
they've had some real advances in the last few years.
So that was
Heat
not
pumps ones,
anything
yeah.
brought to.
My guess is the school is set up for hot water heating, not ducted air heating, so it probably would be.
It has both.
Hard, does
Yeah, it's got propane fired RTUs and then there's hydronic air handlers. They are entertaining a solar option.
Megan, do you have you said you had the breakdown for, I was just curious, which, and you take your time, no rush, you don't have to know it off the top of your head. I'd be curious to know what amount goes into which,
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let me pull that out. Let's see where I wrote it in my notes. On that one. I was like, do you know? I believe it was, I'm not gonna guess, hold on. Did I share it last meeting? Because I pulled all this stuff together for last meeting. Can I ask Sue? Because she probably knows.
Sure.
what we're talking about. Sue, do you know the breakdown, what we had determined for the different, for building, technology? Do you have that dollar amounts? I don't want to misquote it. I'm trying to find it in my notes.
I think it was 30, and, I think it was 107 on the building and 30.
Oh, I did find it, sorry. It was 50,000 for the, technology,
how much, sorry?
50,000
50,
for
okay.
the cyber and technology, 106,310 to the building facility line, and 30,000 for curriculum.
I just have one question, please. You know, the capital reserve funds where the warrant articles go in, do we have balances for that? You know, like when we did a roof, you know, there was so much in there to cover it. Was the roof like 140,000 or something? Is there balances? Because I think that's where a lot of that money goes into, instead of going back to the general fund. You know, it goes into the warrant articles and voters vote on it, you know what I mean?
Yep, we got those. So the balances that we received last night do not include the purchases that have been made this year. So it says, so there is 100,769 in the grounds improvement capital reserve. The building repair line has 263,811, but the 140,000 will be coming
For the
out
roof,
of that for
right,
the roof.
okay.
So minus 140. The special education capital reserve has 171,550, and the textbook capital reserve had 41,870. But again, the intention is to remove all of that for the textbooks that were purchased. So we purchased them through the budget, but then we have to go to the trust funds to, have those funds released to come in to the budget.
So does that mean that,
The last one was, I'm sorry, that was?
The textbook capital reserve?
textbook, okay.
41,870.
so does that mean when we discussed the textbooks, I think we said something like 30,000 or 26,000 for the
That is a-
textbooks?
That is above the 40,000.
That's above the 40?
On
Okay.
top of it.
So,
So you said for the maintenance, building maintenance, so you said there was 263,000 minus 140 for roof repairs. So would you plan on using what's left over for the boiler?
We have not discussed that. It would certainly be,
I mean, it's what it's for, right?
yes. It also is planned for other things that are on the capital improvement plan to do other repairs.
What do you have on the plan for this year, for this next budget?
I would have to look at last year's. There's not a,
I could say for this year, they're looking to replace some stair treads up on the second
there's some-
floor. That's,
no, there's some large, I don't know if I have my CIP.
That's not on
Someone in the
CIP
Town
stuff.
report, yeah.
yeah, there wasn't, I don't know, last time I looked, I think CIP was just for the, upgrade for the science rooms.
That was
but-
23, so that was
Right.
done in.
I just seen it was for 2024, the CIP, but who knows, that's not
I can't-
accurate.
Right, we haven't
Did one like 1 year,
to review that, those were, I don't know off the top of my head what's on the current capital reserve plan, capital improvement plan.
So the ground, like you said there's 100,000 for the grounds improvement. Is that something that can be applied to a boiler, or it has to be specifically, it's been
No,
approved
the
for
reserve funds.
grounds, it has to be used for ground maintenance?
Yeah.
So it's grounds, we've looked at possibly, if we need to repave. There was discussion, it did not happen this year, about bringing, like the sidewalks up to more of an incline to all the spaces around the building to make them all ADA compliant. We have, I believe, 2 entrances for the building that are handicapped accessible and the rest are not. So looking at if we were to raise the sidewalks or things like that, that's what would come out of the grounds plan.
I'm just curious, is it worth bundling a couple of these things up? You know what I mean? You have separate fund for, you can only use it for this or this or this. Is
So
it
that's
worth grouping, couple them together?
That's not our purview. So they are created funds with a intended purpose. So they're not like
You
a
can't just-
pile of money that we could just access as
Right, 'cause-
needed. So they are created for a specific
Right.
purpose.
Is there any sort
So
of
we have to-
procedure to
yes,
override
we-
those?
Right,
No,
because
we
something
have to
might pop
go
up
to
that's
the
really
board to
important. You know what I
request
mean?
those funds be
Emergency
released.
and you need it.
We don't have access to, we have to go and request that those funds are released from the trust funds after once we have something we intend to use the funds for. And the typical process is like textbooks, we have to purchase them, then we go to request the funds be removed from the trust funds to support paying for that.
So
But there is a process to request it. We can't, and it can be denied.
All right.
If it
yeah.
doesn't fit with what
Yeah.
what is stated in the
Right,
fund.
that sounds like a handy, that sounds like your hands are being tied, you know what I mean? It's almost like
That's how they're designed, those reserve funds.
right, maybe they need to be redesigned, that's all I'm saying.
That is not
You know what I mean?
something
Well, I mean,
I'm not saying to you, I'm just saying overall.
Maybe
Not
we
something
have
to solve
to-
it tonight.
If you wanna get rid of one of those funds, you basically have to empty it and
Right.
close it out, no longer
And
using
start
it,
over.
and create a new one that would encompass certain things, like
But
a
it-
fire truck repair, a police, vehicle one. They're very specific, and once they're put that way, they're meant so that towns can't be like, oh, we'll go over here, and then when you finally need to get like a new fire truck, you're like, well, where's the $2 million that's been sitting around you got?
I think it's
Right,
good.
right, certain ones, but like Brian was saying, one's grounds, one's building, maybe that can be consolidated.
I mean, I think it's good that we tie their hands, because then the money has to be used for what the voters voted on. I think it's just, and then you can adjust.
makes sense.
You can adjust the amounts can always be adjusted if it doesn't work, so I think the way it is good.
I'm sorry, who did you have to go to see if you could spend the fund on something? You said you had to get a board to approve it?
The school board?
We have to go to the voters approve the creation of it, and the board is approved to expend the funds in accordance with, what the language was. And the Department of Revenue Administration ensures that you stay honest to what the language was when the voters approved it.
Could you then
That makes sense.
conceivably ask the Department of Revenue whether or not paying for a boiler could be done out of grounds? Out of the grounds fund, based on whatever language was used to?
It's definitely not for that.
Grounds is sort of like outside.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not even, they'll say no. It's
But
it's
we-
But
definitely not.
it doesn't cost anything to ask though.
Yeah, you're trying to ask the
Sure it
government
does,
for
it's not
something.
But asking the voters to do this does cost us money.
Right.
And I'm not sure there's a large cost associated with this, but it's the trustees of the trust fund, sorry, that's what I was thinking. The trustees of the trust fund are the people who kind of
That makes sense.
safeguard those funds, so that's who the board has to go to request to release those funds. Sorry, I was in there.
Good job. Hot seat, and getting it. Any other, let's, we're
Any
getting a little
other
distracted,
questions
so
about
back to
the
Amy, back to the
warrant? Is there anything else so basically, I wanted to share these things with
Yes.
you, so you can see the rationale of the school board and why we determined that at this time, we felt that the best course of action would be to select those areas, so it's not just dumped into the, budget. We found areas we felt that it was truly needed, and based on the financial information we have. So-
Megan, I have one more question. before you knew you were getting these additional adequacy funds, I mean, you knew that the expenditures on the boilers and the textbooks were over budget. Was there some discussion or plan for what you were gonna do for that?
For the boiler.
Yeah, for the boiler and the textbooks, you talked just about some of the things that you've overexpended a little bit, but at that time, you may not have known that you were getting these additional adequacy funds. Did the school board have a plan for how they were gonna address those issues?
We did have, so some of these things have come at different points. So the boiler failure, the decision to replace the boiler, it was basically told to us it could fail at any moment, and then you have to shut down school, and when we were told that in the spring, the board made the determination to move forward, that we felt it was something we needed to purchase. At that point, we were hoping that some of the ESSER funds could be used to support that purchase, and we were hoping that the unassigned fund balance would have enough funds in it to support paying a little less than half, about $100,000 from the unassigned fund balance. Again, the fund balance is something that is kind of a moving target for us. We hope to have close financials when we're making those decisions. Those things have to be purchased and started before June 30th of the fiscal year to be able to expend funds. So now, with these numbers coming clearer and going down significantly from the numbers we saw, that has why we again determined that this money, now those things obviously it needs to be paid for regardless, so it would have to be funded from somewhere else. But we do know that the this is a tight budget, so clearly the year before was a fairly tight budget too, and then so it has to be paid for. If this does not get approved, these things will still come out of the budget. We will just have to figure out what does not get funded that was supposed to be funded throughout the school year, to offset those costs that we had to incur.
So you said the first payment was made for $139,000, and that was out of the ESSER funds?
It is earmarked in ESSER funds in the grant system.
Okay,
So grants, that's why the grants are not on here, like I said, because they track a little differently. So the grant process is a lengthy process that you have to go through. There's all sorts of paperwork that have to be filled out about projects and things like that. I don't know all the ins and outs of that process. And then once it's approved, then we'll be reimbursed, because they don't give you the grants. They have the funds,
Okay.
and then as you spend from it, if it's approved, then they'll pay it back. But we are not at that pay it back state. And with the change in superintendents, we're not sure where we are with that being approved.
okay, so assuming it gets approved, is there additional funds there to follow on for the second half of the payment or whatever?
So it's a,
Or does that burn out the whole thing?
so there's not enough, I believe, in our ESSER balance to cover the entire boiler. And there are certain restrictions on how much can be used for, they give, everyone knows what ESSER is, right?
No.
So the ESSER funds were part of the COVID relief, just like ARPA. Do you know what those are? So it was a COVID relief fund, and they put stipulations on what it can be used for. So because our heating system has to do with air quality and ventilation, it falls within the scope that could be covered by that grant. But that doesn't mean that they will approve that.
Right.
And there is a portion of the grant that has to be direct student facing. So we have an additional math interventionist that's paid out of that grant. But there's a certain percentage, and I don't know that off the top of my head, that has to be directly student facing. So we could not take the entire $300,000 from ESSER and put it towards the boiler. So
I'm
there are
just wondering-
stipulations.
Okay, so where do we fall in that stipulation? Is there additional funds left or not?
To request for There's only an initial pre-approval process, and so that does not cover the full cost of the boiler. So
No,
we
I
could not go,
understand that,
we
but
could not go
clearly-
above the initial approval cost from my
The 139.
knowledge. No, the 139 was not what was, so that's just half of the first
Right,
payment.
right, that's the,
So I'm not sure I can find it quickly what the cost of what we had determined would go, but I believe we'd said 100,000 from unassigned fund balance, so that would leave 168 was our intention to go from the ESSER fund.
okay,
So it's not even with what we've had to pay already, but,
so 30,000 more, basically.
but again, we've been told from our superintendent that there is no guarantee that we will actually receive that
Of
fund.
course not.
30K more, that you'd need additional funding, which,
No, 30K more that they could potentially get from ESSER based on their initial estimate.
gotcha.
We're 20 now, basically, if my math is.
Any other questions for me?
Are there any other kind of catch-all funds that can be used to pay for this type of thing that have balances available?
Catch-all, we don't really have.
Put a shot in the dark, budget
Catch-all
committee
funds.
hasn't approved a lot of catch-all funds recently.
I'm not sure of any catch-all funds. I mean,
No, the grants, sorry, I mean, the grants, the stuff that's redacted out of there, all those
it's
types
not,
of
right.
things.
That is, that could be shared at our next meeting. I just didn't want it to muddy the waters of the numbers, because it's not one-to-one. So
So, and how much is left on the boiler for the
that the rest, the remaining balance will be
Yeah.
paid. So I
139.
think 268 minus 139. I
Yeah,
think it
so
was
268
268,
is the
I
total
think is
still.
the number. That's in my head. And again, I don't have all of those things in front of me, generally.
Very well.
Came
We've
up with
talked
a lot of numbers,
we've
though.
talked a lot about boilers. I know a lot more than I ever did. About glycol.
Yeah, about 130 in the building.
And then,
And there's how much in the building thing?
Well, 263 minus the 140, so about 123.
120, yeah, plus 35K.
So
So there's enough money to pay for that. There should be enough money to pay for it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, yeah, I agree with you.
Yep. Between,
the other thing I did want to say really quickly, that was, I was reminded of last night, part of this unanticipated funds coming to us is automatically there's 65,000 additional that goes straight to general fund. So we were actually received 186,000 plus 65,000. So 65,000 is going straight to general fund.
no matter what.
That, right, correct. That
So
was.
even if it all goes to, if it gets.
65,000, the school board was not allowed to appropriate to anything. It was automatically sent back to general fund. 65,000
Okay.
in addition.
Oh,
to-
okay.
in
that goes
addition.
To general
So
fund.
that- Yeah, to the, right. So that,
So in addition to the funds that are mentioned in this warrant article, there's 65,000 that's going to go into the general fund.
to offset the tax rate, correct.
Yep.
That's helpful to know.
And I was reminded, we initially saw the whole formula and all the numbers, because they do a percentage of what they feel should be retained, and so that was the 65,000. So I did not share that last time.
That's kind of just taxpayer money being returned to the taxpayer, right?
Yes.
Basically,
Yeah.
right, it's all taxpayers' money.
When you say the amount to be retained, you
No.
mean
Pretty
much
the-
all of it
The
is.
186,000, that's the amount to be retained? And the 65?
So the 65,000 automatically goes to the general fund.
Yeah.
65,000. The 186,310 is what the school board is requesting the voters to appropriate to the current operating budget.
How was that defined, that split?
There was a percentage, I don't know off the top of my head, I mean, someone could do the math. But it was a,
Town versus school budget.
so, I can look into that for you, but
It's
it was
3 to 1.
a funding calculation that was.
That's not, no.
That was determined by the state, that this,
Okay.
this percentage is what is, so every state that's getting additional adequacy aid, a certain percentage of whatever their total number is.
Every
going.
town.
Every town.
It's not
That's
really
receiving.
relevant to the discussion.
Well, I'm wondering how they came up with the split, and then when
So
when
we
they
didn't-
when they
We
told
didn't come up with
Okay.
this, but we were
When-
told that.
yeah, when they informed you about this, did they provide guidance on what to do?
So I don't know specifically, I did not attend, there was some sort of webinar. I did not participate in that. There was guidance that, you know, there were multiple options. If we wanted to say we want 186,000 to pay for the boiler, we could have picked a specific thing. There was options of what could be done with the money because it is unanticipated revenue. So when we have, you know, unanticipated funds coming in, the school board has to ask the voters how to use those funds.
Sure, I was just wondering if the state, when they informed you that they were gonna be sending more money in adequacy aid, if they provided any guidance such as like, we recommend you return it to the general fund to reimburse the taxpayers for overpaying, or did they say like, you know, you can take up to 2/3 of this, make sure you come up with some emergency spending that needs to be accomplished so that you can justify appropriating it?
That was certainly not the case.
Okay.
So, I just want to be clear real quick, please. So technically, there was actually 251,000 coming back originally.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay, I'm just finding this out, okay? This is something new now. And then whoever made the split, but if you did nothing, it was all gonna go back to the,
Right.
so I don't get,
No matter what.
why didn't
Right,
we,
it's-
why would, we didn't know this before? I don't get it.
They want
So-
the 186.
Well, the school.
They
so-
can only take
Vegetation.
the 186 is
Excuse me.
all they, sorry.
They want-
Right, but I wasn't aware of the.
Hang on, hang on.
Hey, guys, thank you. But they want that money to go for education, but they also want to provide taxpayer relief, which they know we need, so they're getting pressure to provide more adequacy to
So-
give us some relief.
So I will share, so adequacy funding is determined based on free and reduced lunch numbers. This was discussed in our meeting last night, and they adjusted the dollar amount per student. So that's part of why there's an additional funds. Yearly, we are estimated, but if there are a significant number of students on free and reduced lunch, we would always receive additional adequacy. It's a formula based on need to provide adequate education across different communities, because the taxpayers are, you know, paying for the budget, right? So there are towns that have more students with need, and there are towns that have less students with need. So the state determines this funding, right? We don't have any purview of what the state charges in taxation in this budget committee, but the state has determined this number, and when they did our calculations, this is the additional funding on top of but it is, the reason it's given to towns is to provide adequate education. So that's the point of the funding.
Yep.
The point of the funding is for school education.
But
So
when-
that's what I just.
When we do when you do your annual budget, you take that into consideration, but it's really a small fraction of your revenue. Most of it's coming from, tax receipts. So, you have various places where you're getting revenue, and you could always, we got extra 100,000 in revenue this year. That's great, but nevertheless, you still did your budget already with how much revenue you planned, how much you plan to expend, and regardless of what the adequacy funds is, you had already planned how much you plan to expend. So, just to say we get 186,000 back doesn't necessarily mean we need to appropriate it.
And
It just
so-
has a general
so,
statement.
Correct, so the school board's position is that we feel
We don't
that-
need the warrant article, the voters
Hang on,
already
hang on,
funded it.
guys.
The voters already
Let me
So-
voted on it.
speak.
Well, you made a comment, I was just, I was just replying to your comment.
So, the school board, with all of our information that we have, feels that these funds could be used in these areas in this year. So we have determined that we are putting this to warrant, and the voters can determine if they want to support that or not. So the discussion here is if the budget committee is going to recommend this warrant or not. And then that will just be voted on, and then that information will be provided to the voting public on the 4th, and whoever attends that meeting and chooses to vote can determine what happens with this money. So this committee right here does not determine that. You can determine if you recommend or do not recommend this
So we're
warrant.
recommending whether this 186,310 is basically given to the school for their purposes, or we're recommending that it goes into the town general fund, that's what our vote is tonight. Correct?
So, I mean,
You would be voting to not recommend this.
To not recommend the
So
appropriation,
Right.
typically you'd make a positive motion to recommend this warrant, and then you would vote against that if you do not recommend. That's, I mean, I'm sure the board, the committee has
clear on-
voted on warrants before.
Yes. Are there any more questions then about the warrant?
This adequate education grant, this is the thing in the revenue here that's like 2.1 million.
Yep,
I'm
that's
assuming that's without the extra 180 whatever thousand.
correct. That is what was put in the, let me look at that really quickly. That's what we have not received.
It's in the middle of the
Obviously.
revenue statement.
Yeah, let me find the
Top
revenue
line,
page.
a little more than.
Line
Okay.
3,000 pages. Okay.
3110.4302.
So this is 22, 23, so this is last year's revenues. So just to give you an idea, this is the year that has already closed, not the budget year we're in now.
And then
But
when-
that is what we received in 23s, which is finished, for adequacy funds.
And then when you say there's a formula that the state uses and they change their formula, this is a formula to figure out how it costs to provide an adequate education based on our town's need.
It's town to town, right?
It's a-
Depending on special
It's a formula determined by, there's a couple of factors when we report our student populations.
Right.
They have a formula, and the state determines where the funds from, that the state has collected through taxation to distribute to the towns.
Yeah. Because it's remarkable because, you know, the state has their adequate education formula, and they calculated that to provide an adequate education in Nottingham, it would cost $2.4 million.
Nope, that is to support
Yeah.
what is not, that is to support the education, not provide education. That is to support towns who maybe have higher needs, a larger number of, families on free and reduced lunch. And that's one part of the formula. There are other parts of the formula. Again, those are things that we do not control, that is state controlled. And if you notice, when we vote on a budget that is 15 million, 11 million of that is what's coming from general fund, right? And then from the appropriations, and then 2 million. So these are all included when we do our numbers, because we know estimates of what they're going to provide us. So when we determine our budget, right, we know how it works. So, but again, what happens at the state is not our purview. Right now, the discussion is about the warrant.
Yes. Are there any other questions on the presentation? All right, so I think we're finished number 5 on our agenda. I left a line in here for public comment. Sue, do you have any comments? Seeing as there's no other public, I think we've done number 6 on our agenda. I did leave a line for discussion. I don't know if we need more discussion.
We had the discussion.
Feel like we got,
Jolly well discussed enough, don't you?
I'm not a good presenter.
Did everyone, that was very well done. Does anyone have any more discussion? I guess it's time for a vote then. No discussion, no comments?
Are you looking for a vote now?
I think we need to make a motion to vote, I think.
I move that we vote on the question.
No, I think you need to make a motion about
To-
recommending it.
And,
I move we recommend the warrant article.
okay, there's been a motion,
I'll second Sue.
seconded by Robert
sorry.
Kelly.
I'm sorry, apologize.
Right. Oh, do you call me Sue?
Sandra, yeah, because he mentioned Sue earlier.
That's all right. I've been called worse, that's not bad.
So all then, all in favor of recommending the warrant article as has been discussed? Nice, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. voted to recommend. All that do not recommend the warrant article as discussed, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this motion to recommend failed. 5 votes to 6, so the official tally of the Budget Committee does not recommend this appropriation by a 6-5 vote.
I forgot my other
Right.
discussion notes, but that's fine.
Can we write on here, can we clarify, can we just write like 6 no, 5 yes vote?
That's
Just
what
because
it-
it is confusing sometimes.
That's what it's supposed to say.
Yeah.
It says
should
the budget
say-
committee does not recommend, so if you see, I
It
just,
says by a blank vote.
by a 6-5 vote, does not recommend by a 6-5 vote means that.
I think that's
six
pretty
did
clear.
not recommend, yeah.
I think that's the way it normally sits,
Right.
it goes, Tom.
Yeah, I know,
So,
Yeah.
I
It's,
mean,
but it gets
Describe
extra
language.
confusing when we
It
do
says
negative
does not
motions
recommend.
sometimes.
you should not be doing negative motions.
It doesn't gonna show up like it is.
All right, I take it all back. It's perfect the way it is.
I think anything with not a strong approved or deny anyway raises a lot of questions.
Yeah.
for people anyway. They're gonna look at it and be like, ooh, there's a lot of contention.
Right.
They're gonna
So-
say,
We have,
since I missed my opportunity on the other discussion, I just want to say why I voted against this. Because I think it's an unnecessary burden on the citizens and taxpayers to have this extra meeting. I mean, because the budget should have been, you know, the budget should not be impacted by additional revenues. You know, we budgeted, we did the thing with the process, we followed the process, came up with a budget. You know, oh, great, we're getting this windfall, that's awesome. But that doesn't mean we have to go spend it right away. You know, we did our work last year. So that's why I recommended, or did not recommend it.
Speaking of the extra cost, did you guys ever find out how much this special meeting is gonna
So
cost?
there was discussion, I do not have numbers, but the sense that the school board pays for the audiovisual is typically what's happened. So there is no AV. I believe the supervisor, the checklist are stipend, I believe that comes out of the town budget? Or whatever, their.
No, it comes out of the school board budget.
Okay, so, and so there are certain people that are required to be there, the moderator is a stipended position, so the additional cost, I'm not sure what that would be. There's no voting machines, there's no ballots, it's people sitting like a town meeting,
Yeah.
raising their hand yes or no.
But there is a cost.
And the cost
it
would
just sounds
be-
like it was never even considered. And you say like the school,
So-
you say the school
so-
pays for it, but really it's coming out of all our wallets.
So the cost would be in what way?
So to have this special meeting,
Yeah, you gotta pay the moderator and the
No,
checklist
so the
people,
moderator
all
is a
those people.
stipended position, is paid regardless, their
Right.
job is paid for one
Right, so-
price all year long. So, yeah.
so you have your,
Police?
Well,
You
you're
have
gonna
police
have-
there?
No.
right, you'll have your police, you'll have your supervisors, you'll have your, the other people that,
I assume stuff's gonna get printed out and distributed? Printing costs?
That are in
I
the
mean,
school board
you could
budget
maybe
line,
say
so.
it would cost $100.
You,
Yeah,
no,
I
I
mean,
bet
100
it's gonna be more than that.
I would not
The
imagine it
special
costs-
election we just had was like $10,000.
So that is a different, so the
No,
special
you have to
election
pay
is a
for
different thing, that's
an
not,
elector,
so
like,
we did
counter.
not feel that it
Those
was
people get
it was a negligible cost in our, we have to post,
Right,
make
it's
an
not
RFP, I mean, those, all things have a small cost associated with them. So that was not discussed in our, because we didn't feel that it was a, large enough, I don't, whether people don't want, to hold a meeting, I don't know, but the school board felt that,
And when is the meeting?
October 4th.
And
and
where?
communicated to the people that are supposed to be there.
What time and where?
There's going conversations with the moderator, so I don't know.
Just getting off the other election.
And I think that part of it was,
Different moderator.
so,
Right.
Yeah, it's
Different
different moderator, yeah. Yep.
you have a question? October 4th, again, we wanted
We
the
need to
warrant
have
so
the-
we could post it publicly with the warrant information included for everyone, so that posting will be going out next week.
Where will be this meeting, where will the meeting be?
The
in
school, gymnasium.
School gym at what time?
6, 6 o'clock on October 4th.
6 o'clock on 6 o'clock on October 4th, where? At the
School gymnasium, yep,
At the
school.
school gym?
Like a deliberative would be kind of.
Are you guys set on 6? Could it be 7? That seems to work
So,
better for people that have 9 to 5
We
jobs.
have a school board meeting immediately following, and so I told you when ours went into last night, so, I think 6 is what we determined.
How many people are on school board? 5? So, I mean, there's a lot more taxpayers and voters and stuff, schedules to work around than 5 people.
6 is our typical meeting times.
They
Right.
set it at 6, it's at 6, so. Now, is it?
Tom,
is
you
this
have
something
budget
that
committee, yeah, one
The
in
budget
the
committee
morning.
will have a table at, and do you need us to, any role for the
Not
budget
discuss
there?
that, I don't feel there is we did not discuss that.
Okay, and you could,
I can let you
if you
know.
wanna let us know, you guys can regroup. Yeah, I know you had a late night, and thanks for all your work that you put into it. We all really appreciate it. So if you wanna let us know if you need a presence, I can certainly go and I could read our recommendation like they do at the regular town meetings. I think that's it, discussion on that. Thanks a lot, Megan.
Yeah.
And to the whole school board for all your work on it.
Had your kids, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Good night, for their sleep.
Are there any committee reports?
I haven't heard nothing, CIP, I had talked to, I seen him at voting, he says he's waiting for the planning board or something to get all together. He said last year they had like one a year, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So, nothing to report right now
Yeah, we have
for our
not
first meeting.
got together we've thrown some days out, but nothing. And we hadn't, I think planning board, we're waiting on November.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Okay.
Most of the stuff I had, has already been covered. School's still entertaining, putting an additional building out back.
We, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. We, at our meeting last night, determined that for this year, we will not be moving forward with putting anything on the, to warrant for an additional, building for March. So it's,
That's
Is
tabled
that
for-
kind of like, because it might be like a bond thing rather than
It
a
would-
warrant thing?
it would need to go to bond, and so, the board's assertion last night was that it was pretty late in the process to be putting out RFPs to request bids, because the window gets really tight, to then get bond counsel. There's a lot involved with bonding, and so to do it so late, we have ballpark financial, so we don't have any information, and so the board's, moved last night to, put that on hold for this year.
What is the ballpark? Because when I first started hearing about it, the talk was that it was low enough that it could be done as a warrant article, not as a bonded thing. Like under $1 million, but it's
No,
certainly not
under
now,
that.
right?
I think they floated it would cost $350,000 to $400,000 just for excavation to put the pad.
Wow.
So, but those are like old numbers anyway, so, but I didn't mean to interrupt facilities, I just wanted to update that that's where we're at with that.
That's all I had.
Okay. Reports, other business? I think our next meeting is, I don't have it.
October
Didn't
5th?
prepare. October 5th, sounds right? So it'll be the day after your meeting, so. It's a double doozy again.
2 in a row.
to adjourn.
Next meeting is when?
October
By
5th?
Tom, second by Owen, all in favor of adjournment? All right, thank you very
How
much,
this
everyone.
came out.
Go home and watch the